Surging Sparks is almost here, which means it's time for us to take a high-level look at the overall metagame going into this new format. We're going to be covering examples of new decks, examples of current meta decks, as well as a bunch of rogue decks as well, seeing how things shake up in the new Surging Sparks meta and what new cards will be added to all of these decks. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's dig in. We're going to kick things off with Pikachu EX. It's got 200 HP and the ability Resolute Heart, where if this Pokemon has full HP and would be knocked out by an attack, it's not knocked out, and its remaining HP becomes 10. So it's actually kind of tanky, and it has the attack Topaz Bolt for 1 grass, lightning, and a metal energy, does 300 damage, and you discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. Now, it's the amount of damage is great, but not perfect. It's going to be a little awkward against some Stage 2 decks like a Charizard or a Dragapult, and discarding all that energy can be really annoying. But there are a number of different archetypes that can mitigate those issues. The most popular one we've seen so far in Japan is Blissey EX, which comes with a number of benefits. For one, it has the Happy Switch ability, where once during your turn, you can move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. And on top of that, you can pair Blissey EX with Glass Trumpet, where if you've got a Tera Pokemon in play, which is Pikachu here, you can choose up to 2 of your benched colorless Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them. So you can attach energy to your Chanseys or your Blisseys, and then use Blissey's ability to move that energy back to Pikachu, at which point Pikachu can land the attack on consecutive turns. Precious Trolley is a new A-Spec that works wonders in this archetype, lets you search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. It does get you your Pikachus and Munkidori and Greninja, but in particular, getting those Chanseys down so that you can evolve them into Blissey on future turns and get your engine established so that you can be moving energy back to your Pikachus on consecutive turns. So Precious Trolley feels like a fundamental piece of the puzzle. Gravity Mountain helps us fix our Stage 2 matchups, where each Stage 2 Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, get minus 30 HP, at which point Charizard is going down with 1 hit against Pikachu, as well as Dragapult. Before we continue with this video, quickly wanted to let you know that I am fundraising for Extra Life. 100% of the proceeds go towards the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals, a network of 170 hospitals taking care of thousands of kids every day. If you would like to support this cause, hit the link in the description of this video. I'll also flash it on the screen right here. Thank you to everybody that's made a donation so far, including Player 2 Start, JF Raptor Fan, and Robert and Griff. Thank you all for your wonderful support. And if you're interested in supporting the cause, hit the link in the description. And if you support at one of the 3 reward tiers, you can get a signed Pokemon card from me, as well as prints of my spray paint art, such as this Greninja one, this Mewtwo one I'm holding upside down. We've got a Super Mario one here, and a bonus Night Sky painting. So if you want to support a wonderful cause while also getting some fun stuff from me, hit the link in the description of this video. All right, lock in. Let's get back to it. Here's another example of Pikachu with Blissey. This time, this version includes an Iron Hands EX, where that Amp You Very Much attack does 120 damage, and if you get a KO with it, you can take 1 more prize card. This helps us in our single prize matchups, where Pikachu EX is not that great against a single prizer. You're doing way too much damage. You're having to discard all of the energy. Iron Hands EX can turn those 1 prizers into 2 prizers while keeping your resources on that attacking Pokemon. Pikachu also has a home in Lost Zone box. This is a pretty standard issue Lost Zone deck with your Cramorant, Sableye, and so on. Lots of different ways of attacking, but Pikachu gives you a powerful mid-game attacker that's also really tanky. So if they can't set up damage early on the Pikachu to knock it out, you could potentially get 2 attacks in of 300 damage, or maybe even more attacks than that. We even see Pikachu in the Regigigas deck, and just as a quick refresher, Regigigas can accelerate 3 energy cards from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, which is a great way of keeping the energy going across multiple turns. Now, the quirk is you have have to have all of the Regis in play, and you're also going to need Area 0 Underdepths in play in order to fit all of the Regis plus your Pikachu EX or your Iron Hands or the Water Ogerpon. Whatever Pokemon you're going to put in play, you're going to also need to have that Area 0 Underdepths in play. And also keep in mind that if you're going to play Area 0 Underdepths, you got to get most of the Regis on there, but keep room for a Terra Pokemon before you play the stadium so that you can actually expand the bench to 8. And one other Pokemon you might want to squeeze onto your expanded bench is Latias EX, where its Skyliner ability lets your basic Pokemon have no retreat cost. This is a card we're going to see a lot today because it's a fantastic ability. I have concerns about Pikachu with Magneton. I do think Magneton is a really strong card where once during your turn you can attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your lightning Pokemon in any way you like. And if you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. So you don't have to worry about it being like just lightning energy. You can accelerate the lightning, the grass, and the metal energy from the discard pile to your Pikachu on consecutive turns, but you are coughing up a prize each time you use this ability. So you're going to have to be careful when you do it. But against multi-prize decks in particular, you're trading one Magneton for a multi-prize Pokemon KO. That's fantastic. I'm really excited for Ceruledge EX. Its Abyssal Flames attack looks really cool, does 30 damage plus 20 more damage for each energy card in your discard pile. I do have concerns about it doing not enough damage in the early game, but if you can ramp fast enough, Ceruledge theoretically could one-hit KO anything in the game. If you want to see the Ceruledge lists in more detail, head over to my Ceruledge video. Link is in the description, similar with the Pikachu EX, but we will look at it at a high level here. This one from Japan that got second place at a City League tournament is very vanilla. It's basically just Ceruledge attacking, and that's it. But one of the new things that we do see in this deck is the Brilliant Blender A-Spec, where you get to search your deck for up to 5 cards and discard them, then shuffle your deck. You can discard 5 fire energy there, giving you an extra 100 damage on your attack. Not every Ceruledge deck plays the Brilliant Blender, but it does make for a wonderful pairing between the Pokemon and the A-Spec, giving you that extra damage buff. This second variation of Ceruledge squeezes in Zamazenta V. This is a card we haven't really seen in a while, but it does have a great ability that synergizes with Ceruledge, where that Regal Stance ability lets you discard your hand and draw 5 cards, and if you use this ability, your turn ends. So this is something you're going to use primarily turn 1, going first, maybe going second, but you get to dump your hand and get a fresh set of cards while also potentially throwing more energy in the discard pile for you to have a bigger attack on the following turn. This third Ceruledge list squeezes in a 1/1 Regidrago VSTAR. These days, we know Regidrago is one of the best attackers in the game, but here it is just a tech for that Legacy Star ability, where when you pop it, you get to discard the top 7 cards of your deck, and then grab 2 cards from your discard pile and put them back into your hand. Not only is this a great way of dumping energy from the top of your deck into the discard pile, but you can do things like grab that Brilliant Blender, which you've already used on a previous turn, grab it, and then play it again so that you can dump even more energy. Incredibly cool combo. Ceruledge with Palkia gives you a couple of other ways of approaching a battle. Palkia, for example, is a very strong attacker. Its Subspace Swell attack does 60 damage plus 20 damage for each bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. This can swing for upwards of 260 damage if both players have 5 Pokemon on their benches, and it could go even higher if your opponent's playing the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium, and it's very efficient with only 2 water energy. You can even power up Palkia without much help thanks to Star Portal, where it lets you accelerate 3 water energy from your discard pile to your water Pokemon in any way you like. And not only can you power up Palkia, but it also lets you power up Greninja EX for a potential snipe attack. One more take on Ceruledge EX. This one is using Drillbur and its Dig 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 ability, where when you play this from your hand to your bench, you can discard 3 basic fighting energy cards from your deck, and then you basically get an extra 60 damage on your upcoming Ceruledge attack. And it's only a single prize Pokemon, so it's not that big of a deal, not that much of a threat on your bench. It does have 70 HP, so you're kind of avoiding the whole Dragapult Phantom Dive stuff. I'm not sure if this is the best way to play Ceruledge, but it is another way of dumping energy faster. This take on Ceruledge techs in a 2/1 line of Azumarill. This is another new card in Surging Sparks, and it has the ability Glistening Bubbles, where if you have any Terra Pokemon in play, this Pokemon can use the Double Edge attack for only 1 Psychic Energy. And Double Edge is really strong for 230 damage, and this Pokemon also does 50 damage to itself. That's not that big of a deal, but 230 is incredible for only 1 Psychic Energy. So in the context of Ceruledge EX, you can use this as an early game attacker where you are doing more damage than Ceruledge normally would in the early game. I mean, you could potentially use this towards the end game as sort of a desperation attack, but it also just skews the prize race regardless of where you use it. So some really cool applications for Azumarill here. Now, I was kind of surprised. I thought this would be more of a single prize deck, but looking at the results in Japan, no one's really been playing it as its own deck. It's just been teched into some other decks. First off, thank you so much for watching this far into the video. But before we continue, quickly wanted to let you know that I am hosting a 24-hour Extra Life marathon where we are playing games all day, all night in support of the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals. I'm going to have family and friends over. We're going to be playing some Pokemon TCG, playing a bunch of other video games, opening up Pokemon card packs. We will be tasting weird snacks. It's going to be an awesome show in support of a wonderful cause. I'm going to be hosting the whole thing on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/inthirdperson. Would love to see you there. And if you'd like to make a donation to the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals to support us and support a wonderful cause, hit the link in the description of this video where you can also get some cool stuff from me, including a signed Pokemon card and prints of my spray paint art if you donate at one of the 3 reward tiers. So I'll hold that one upside down. Here you go. And the Greninja one here as well. So if you want to make a donation towards a wonderful cause and get some cool stuff from me, hit the link in the description of this video and make a donation today. All right, let's get back to it. Archaludon EX is a beefy Pokemon. It's only a stage 1, but it has 300 HP, which is going to be incredibly difficult for a lot of Pokemon to one-hit KO. It has the ability Assemble Alloy, where you can accelerate 2 basic metal energy cards from your discard pile to your metal Pokemon in any way you like, which makes it really easy to pull off the Metal Defender attack for 3 metal energy, does 220 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon has no weakness. Being able to shut off weakness is fantastic. 220 is a little bit of a weird number. You are hitting a lot of basic EXs and Vs and one-hit KOing them, but there are bigger EX Pokemon like your Raging Bolts and Roaring Moons and Iron Hands that are going to be out of range. But the fact that you are an incredibly tanky Pokemon at 300 HP, and there are ways of healing this Pokemon and bringing in new ones, could potentially turn the tide in your favor. This 4th place list from Tokyo uses the Dunsparce as its draw engine, where you get to draw 3 cards and then shuffle the Dunsparce and any attached cards back into the deck. It's a cool way of getting these smaller Pokemon off the board to prevent them from getting sniped out, while also having a way of drawing cards. And then on top of that, we also have Relicanth, which is a cool ability where it lets you use the pre-evolution attacks on your evolution Pokemon. And in this case, it lets you use Duraludon's Raging Hammer attack, where it does 80 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So Archaludon, being a very tanky Pokemon, is going to absorb a bunch of hits, at which point the Raging Hammer attack, which you can copy, becomes pretty much a one-hit KO option on anything in the game. Professor Turo's Scenario is a healing option of sorts in the deck, where you can just scoop up your Archaludon and then get rid of all the energy that goes in the discard pile, but then you can evolve another Duraludon into Archaludon and use its ability to accelerate 2 of that metal energy back. So you just have to attach Run from hand, and you basically move all of the damage that your opponent did on the previous turn off of your Pokemon, nullifying that turn. So we've got a couple of Turos in here so that we can keep our Archaludons alive longer. This 1st place list uses Luxray, which is a card we don't see all that much. It has the ability Explosiveness, where if this Pokemon is in your hand when you're setting up to play, you can play it face down as your active Pokemon, no need to evolve. And it has the attack Seeking Fang, where for 1 colorless energy does 50 damage, and search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Getting some trainer cards into your hand to help you set up on the following turn is fantastic, and that 50 damage could be enough to fix some math on the following following turn. This last variation of Archaludon has Dialga VSTAR in it, where its Metal Blast ability is okay, especially if you can get a ton of energy onto Dialga VSTAR, which you could potentially do with the Archaludon ability. But the big appeal here is Star Chronos, where for 4 metal and a colorless, you do 220 damage and you get to take another turn. And it's not the most difficult to get 5 energy on Dialga with Archaludon. If you can get 2 Archaludons set up and get a bunch of energy in the discard pile, you could power this up conceivably in 1 turn and then go. Sylveon EX has 270 HP. It evolves from Eevee or the upcoming Eevee EX, and it has 2 attacks. The first one, Magical Charm, for a Psychic and 2 colorless, does 160 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, attacks used by this defending Pokemon do 100 less damage. It's kind of a worse Gouging VSTAR in that way. I'm not sure it's going to see much use, the Magical Charm attack, but its Angelite attack, if you can pull it off, is very cool. For a Water, Lightning, and Psychic Energy, you just wipe 2 bench Pokemon off of the board. So you could do some really cool combos where you send a support Pokemon into the active and then you just wipe their 2 attackers off the board, or you wipe their support Pokemon. Whatever the case might be, you can just take them off of the board completely. You don't get any sort of prizes for that, but when you take those Pokemon out, it could be devastating for your opponent who may not have the ability to set back up. You could use Sylveon in a Lost Box engine where you still have your usual assortment of attackers like your Sableye, Cramorant, and Greninja, and then use Sylveon to wipe 2 bench Pokemon out of the game. You could also play it in a Gardevoir deck as a tech attacker of sorts. You can use Gardevoir to accelerate 1 Psychic Energy. You could then attach one of the other colors, whether it is a Water or a Lightning, and then use that Sparkling Crystal to round things off and set this up in 1 turn. And we also still have the Drifloon in here as our heavy hitter attacker. Hydreigon EX is a big Stage 2 Pokemon at 330 HP with 2 cool attacks. Its first one, for Dark and Colorless, does 200 damage and you discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. So very cool mill option there. And then its second attack, if you can charge it up, for a Psychic, Dark, Metal, and Colorless, does 130 damage to the active and then 130 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. If you can pull this attack off twice and hit some basic EXs, you pretty much can finish the game in 2 attacks, taking 2 prize apiece after that second go. So very intriguing attack, also very hard to set up. This first example here puts it in a Pidgeot, sort of Charizard type build, where you've got the Pidgeot to help you draw cards, the Rotom to help you draw cards, the Lumineon grabs you supporter, and so on. We do have Crispin to help cover some of the energy acceleration cost. We also see Neo Upper Energy here to cover some of the energy acceleration as well. One of the new cards we see here is Counter Gain, where if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to cost 1 colorless less. So for only 1 energy, you can pull off that 200 damage plus milling 3 cards. And let's go back here a little bit. We also have Monkey Dory to help fix some of our math, where when you've got a Dark Energy on Monkey Dory, you can move 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you could soften up the active, do 230 damage, at which point you're taking out some of the bigger EX Pokemon like a Roaring Moon or an Iron Hands in 1 hit, while also milling their cards. We could also play Hydreigon in a Lost Zone box deck. I mean, yes, you can play anything in a Lost Zone deck, but one of the benefits here is that we can use Mirage Gate to accelerate a whole bunch of energy to Hydreigon, making that second attack much more usable. Milotic EX has the annoying ability Sparkling Scales, where you prevent all damage from and effects of attacks from your opponent's Terra Pokemon done to this Pokemon. You are walling off attacks from Pokemon like Charizard and Dragapult and Terapagos, which makes this very annoying to deal with. Its attack is pretty mid for 1 water and 2 colorless, does 160 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. But if you're able to wall off your opponent's deck with that ability, it could keep you in the game and even win you some. This first place City League deck from Kyoto pairs Milotic with a bunch of walling Pokemon, such as Noivern EX, where its Covert Flight attack does 70 damage and prevents it from getting hit from basic Pokemon on the following turn. Certain decks like Raging Bolt are going to have a really sad time once Noivern locks in. Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon can wall itself off against Pokemon that have an ability. Mimikyu has the Safeguard ability where it prevents itself from getting hit from Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. Now, it's a lot to juggle, admittedly, but if you are a fan of walling decks, having the options between Mimikyu, Cornerstone Mask, Ogerpon, Noivern, and Milotic gives you a lot of options to avoid getting hit. And then for getting the energy onto the Milotic, we've got Palkia VSTAR here, where its Star Portal ability can accelerate energy to your water Pokemon. We also have some walling from the bench of sorts. We've got the new Gastrodon with the Sticky Bind ability, where as long as this Pokemon is on your bench, benched Stage 2 Pokemon, both yours and your opponents have no abilities. This is pretty awesome against, say, Dusknoir decks, where they are Cursed Blasting from the bench. Can't do that. Now, it's not perfect. They could move Dusknoir into the active and then just blow it up, at which point the Gastrodon goes out of the play and then you're in trouble. But there are going to be a lot of Stage 2 decks that will be very annoyed at not having to deal with Gastrodon shutting off their abilities. Slaking EX is huge with 340 HP and the ability Born to Slack, where if your opponent has no Pokemon EX or Pokemon V in play, this Pokemon can't attack. It does kind of suck when you can't attack, so against single prize decks, you pretty much auto lose, but so many decks, like I'd say the vast majority of competitive decks, have EX or V Pokemon in them. Even if their primary attackers aren't EXs or Vs, you probably have a Pheasantipity or something in play, or a Squawkabilly, at which point the attack is active. And the attack is nuts. For 2 colorless energy, Great Swing does 280 damage and discards an energy from this Pokemon. In this top 16 list, we squeeze Slaking into a Terapagos deck with the Dusknoir action, and I think my favorite card in this is actually the Boomerang energy, where if this card gets discarded by an effect of an attack used by a Pokemon this card is attached to, you get to actually reattach it to that Pokemon after attacking. So the discarding an energy from Slaking, just discard the Boomerang energy, and then you just put it right back onto Slaking so you're ready to attack on the next turn. Palossand EX has some weird attacks. Its Sand Tomb attack for 160 damage for 3 colorless energy does 160 and the defending Pokemon can't retreat. But its Barite Jail attack for Water Psychic Fighting lets you put damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon until its remaining HP is 100. That is a lot of chip damage on your opponent's Pokemon, but how do you get the rest of the damage on there? At which point, maybe you pair it with Flygon EX, this one's a Stage 2 Pokemon with 310 HP, and its Sonic Peridot attack for Water, Fighting, and Metal Energy does 100 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. So theoretically, if you pair these together, you could set up damage with the Palossand, and then Flygon can come in and just board wipe your opponent, which is what we see in this example. Now, this one wasn't in a tournament. Pokemon's official channel, YouTube channel in Japan, put out this list as a proof of concept, so I can't speak to how strong this deck actually is, but in theory, I love the idea of it, being able to set up a bunch of damage with the Palossand and then come in with the Flygon and with one attack, just board wipe your opponent. Sounds so cool. And we even have some text like TM Devo there if you're fighting against a evolution deck and potentially wipe them out that way. Some really cool options here. I'm not sure how good this was really going to be, but I do love the thought. Now let's cover the decks that we already have, and I'm going to go in order of usage from Limitless for most of this. So we're going to start things off with the current most popular deck right now, Raging Bolt EX. It's basically the same thing, not really seeing much of a difference here. I'd say that in Western lists, we are seeing a lot more Bravery Charm than in this list from Japan. If anything, I struggled to find list examples that even had Bravery Charm, but otherwise, we're not really seeing much difference between the Raging Bolt lists we see in Stellar Crown versus the ones we will get in the upcoming Surging Sparks. Charizard EX looks to still be very strong, but it doesn't really gain any new cards in Surging Sparks, which is fine. Charizard is still an incredibly strong deck, and there are still definitely ways of tweaking the list to whatever meta you're playing in. Like, for example, you could put in Unfair Stamp or Hero's Cape or Prime Catcher or Maximum Belt. Lots of different A-specs work well in Charizard, so definitely still some ways of optimizing your list however you want, even if there aren't really any new Surging Sparks cards in there. Terapagos EX is another deck that doesn't really change. I promise you that there are going to be meta decks in this video that will see some more changes, but these first few are basically the same thing that we've seen in Stellar Crown. This version of Dragapult Pidgeot actually does see a change, and we are seeing one new card here in the Terra Orb, where you get to search your deck for a Terra Pokemon, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. There are players who are just going to be fine playing Ultra Ball, but Terra Orb lets you get that Dragapult without having to discard any cards. So I think that this is an alright card, and some decks, of course if you're not playing a Terra deck, this isn't going to work at all, but Terra decks definitely should consider putting one of these in their lists. Most people are playing Dragapult with just the Dusknoir engine now. Maybe some are still playing with the Pidgeot, but Dragapult Xatu is still getting some results here and there. This is a first place list from Japan, and we actually see a single prize attacker make its way into the list in the new Azelf, where for one Psychic and a colorless does 10 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on all of your opponent's Pokemon. This is probably not going to be that great of a single prize attacker in the early game, but towards the late game, this could be sort of like your Radiant Charizard doing a bunch of damage if you've set up a bunch of damage on the board already. I guess if you send something like you attack with Dragapult in the early game, do 200 on a multi-prize Pokemon, and then you send that one to the bench, then this Azelf does absolutely crazy. So scratch what I said earlier, this could be kind of cool in the mid game as well. Regidrago VSTAR is essentially unchanged, which is fine. Regidrago is an absolutely busted deck, and it kind of doesn't need any more text, except that it actually kind of did get a new card here. We see one new potential attacker. Not every Regidrago list I saw uses this card, but we do have to point out that Alolan Executor EX is a card that you can put into your Regidrago lists going forward. Tropical Frenzy might be okay as a early attacker where you can do 150 damage plus attach any number of basic energy cards from your hand to your Pokemon in any way you like. Maybe this is the solution to get 3 Regidrago VSTAR set up if you have a whole bunch of energy in hand. Or you could attach extra energy after you've attached with the Ogerpon, so you've got that energy to move around later, while also taking out like a smaller single prize Pokemon. But really the big attack you want to copy here is a Swinging Sphene, where you flip a coin, and if heads, you knock out your opponent's active basic Pokemon. If tails, knock out one of your opponent's benched basic Pokemon. And not every deck is going to have a big basic attacking, but you could take out stuff like a Pheasantipity or a Squawkabilly with this attack, which could be awesome. So a little bit of a gamble here for sure, but definitely something to consider. Lugia is essentially unchanged, which is fine because Lugia is still incredibly strong. There are still debates on whether or not you're playing something like a Klefki to stop Iron Thorns or how many Chinchinos you're playing in the deck. Regardless, however you end up building it, Lugia has proven to be incredibly strong and continues to be strong even if it doesn't really get any new cards in this upcoming set. Palkia is another one where the Dusknoir variant of the deck is basically unchanged, which is fine. This is still a very strong deck with a lot of cool attack options, especially if you go first. Players aren't really using Palkia in the Terapagos engine anymore, but it is still a way that you can play the deck that has gotten some results in Japan. Here's a 4th place result from the Chiba City League tournament, and we're using Palkia here as our big attacker, potentially one-hit KOing everything in the game, and we tech in an Iron Leaves here for the Charizard matchup. We've gone a few sets in a row now where Gardevoir hasn't gotten anything, and maybe it needs a bit more support than it did back then. The Shrouded Fable format was not too kind to Gardevoir with the Dusknoirs blowing up everywhere. Gardevoir is still a good deck, but it does have some more threats that keep it away from the toppity top tiers, but Gardevoir is still a strong deck and just not really getting anything new in Surging Sparks. Iron Thorns is basically the same thing, still a strong, annoying control deck. Really going to come down to how you optimize the deck, whether you're playing Airy, Penny, how many Pokemon catchers you're playing in the deck. Regardless of how you go about it, Iron Thorns is probably still a serious threat while also being very annoying to fight against. Though kind of fun to play, and I'd say if you're looking to play some sort of controlling archetype, Iron Thorns is probably the easiest one of the bunch. Snorlax Stall continues to be a threat, and it gets one new card in Durant EX. We're not using it to attack, but we are using its sudden shearing ability to mill a card off of our opponent's deck when we play it from our hand. And we could do some nasty stuff like loop it with Penny so that we can mill multiple cards in one go. I'm not sure this is going to be like a game-changing card for Snorlax, but it kind of takes the Chi-Yu spot of milling cards, and you don't have to put it into the active and attack. Miraidon EX gets a couple of new friends, including Pikachu EX. However, we are not attacking with Pikachu in this deck. We are using it strictly because it is a lightning basic Terra Pokemon that Miraidon can summon with its ability, which then activates Area 0 Underdepths, opening our bench up to 8, which gives us more room for support Pokemon and also makes Raikou attack stronger. We also have the new Magneton in here with its Overvolt Discharge ability, where once during your turn, you can accelerate 3 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon in any way you like, and if you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. So you're coughing up a prize to accelerate energy to your many attackers in here. Raikou, Iron Hands, even Raichu becomes more relevant now because you can pop the Magneton and get 180 damage on Raichu, ready to rock with those 3 energy. So really cool combo here with the Magneton. We also have the Latias EX, which gives all of our basic Pokemon no retreat cost, giving the decks a lot of options in terms of moving the right attacker in and out of the active. This second Miraidon list looks very similar to the last, but it squeezes in a single copy of Rotom. Now, this one has the attack Crushing Pulse, where your opponent reveals their hand and you discard all item cards and Pokemon tool cards you find there. This is probably not something you're going to be using in the mid to late game, but as a turn 1 going second attack, maybe you're not able to get enough energy to get your Iron Hands rolling or something like that. You can slap this into the active and use this to slow down your opponent, where you can just force them to discard their items and tools in hand, and that could help you buy enough time so you can get your other attackers rolling. Pidgeot Control is debatably the best deck in the game. The only thing holding it back is that it's really hard to play, so there are very few people that can pilot this deck effectively. But for those players who are killing it with this deck right now, kudos to you. You get one more new tool in the Black Kyurem EX, where for 3 colorless energy, you do 90 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is a dragon Pokemon, it's now paralyzed. This is going to help you out a lot against decks like Regidrago and Raging Bolt. It feels like a bad time to play Roaring Moon with all of the Dusknoir shenanigans, especially after you Frenzied Gouging. They could just blow up and take out your Roaring Moon, but it's still seeing some success in Japan. Here's a first place list, and we have a couple of new additions to the deck, including the new Miraidon, where its Unrelenting Onslaught attack for 2 colorless energy does 30 damage, plus if one of your other ancient Pokemon used an attack during your last turn, this attack does 150 more damage. And I think the right way to play this is after one of your Roaring Moons does an attack, you kind of bring in the Miraidon as your second attacker to swing for 180 damage, potentially one-hit KO a smaller support multi-prize Pokemon like a Lumineon or a Squawkabilly, or just do big damage to whatever is in the active. And this is going to be better than Baby Roaring Moon during the early to mid game because you don't need to have a whole bunch of ancient cards in the discard pile. We also see Latias EX again here to give ourselves free retreat. And yes, we do have the Pecharunt EX, which can move dark Pokemon into the active, but Pecharunt is not going to move Miraidon into the active. So we do have that Latias EX to give us a bit more movement flexibility. Gholdengo with Palkia is basically the same deck we've seen before, but this version of the deck squeezes in, well, for one, it squeezes in the new Optimal Gimmighoul, where its Mirror Errand running attack also has 70 HP, which is great. Its first attack for 1 colorless energy lets you search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck, giving you more opportunities to load your hand with energy for a stronger turn to attack. We also see the Gastrodon here, which prevents your bench stage 2 Pokemon, yours and your opponent's, prevents them from having access to their abilities. So you can slow down decks like your Dusknoir decks, Charizard if it's on the bench, stuff like that. Gholdengo with Palkia is basically the same, but that doesn't mean there are no other changes to Gholdengo. There is a new A-Spec here that kind of makes it difficult to squeeze Palkia in here too, but it does give you some benefits that the other builds don't, and that is Energy Search Pro, which is a new A-spec, and it lets you search your deck for any number of basic energy cards of different types, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So we don't necessarily have extra water energy anymore because we're trying to just grab one of each energy type and then a couple extra to power up Gholdengo. But if you can grab all of your energy in one go, this can fix one of Gholdengo's biggest problems where it just doesn't hit very well in the early game, but this lets you grab all that energy in one shot and lets you hit for upwards of 350 to 400 damage depending on how much energy you have in the deck and how much you grab, and then you just have to worry about recovering the energy after that. So depending on what you're looking for, maybe you still want Palkia as an early game attacker or potentially have access to that Greninja snipe attack, but Energy Search Pro is at the very least a cool option to consider. This Gholdengo list is a little more teched out with the Monkey Dory tech, the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, and a 2-1 line of Azumarill, where its Glistening Bubbles ability lets it attack for only 1 energy, and for that 1 energy, you can use the Double Edge attack for 230 damage, giving you a single prize attacker that's hitting really hard, and yes, you do damage to yourself, but that's for more often than not going to be that big of a deal. And yeah, it's an interesting inclusion here, especially since Gholdengo is a deck that struggles in the early game to get all of its energy ready. So having a single prize attacker that can hit for 230 damage as early as turn 2 is awesome. Now just keep in mind here that Gholdengo EX is not a Terra Pokemon. You're gonna have to have the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon in play in order to activate this ability. I don't know what it is with Gholdengo, but it is a deck that has a lot of weird techs being thrown in to see what sticks. And this one now has the new Togekiss from Surging Sparks, where when your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, you flip a coin. If heads, take 1 more prize card. The effect of Wonder Kiss doesn't stack, and this is why we only see a 1-1 Togekiss line here, because you can't flip multiple times for multiple prizes. But being able to potentially take extra prizes is awesome, and there were a couple of other decks. This isn't seeing too much play in Japan, but did want to throw this one in here because this was the highest placing list with Togekiss. This 8th place list doesn't have any new cards, but it does squeeze in the Dusknoir line, which can help you fix some math when Gholdengo isn't hitting enough because you're short on energy, or could help you take out some smaller Pokemon to race to the finish even faster. Lost Box has been gaining a little bit of momentum of late, and Giratina has actually seen a couple of good results here and there. It's basically unchanged though, which is fine. Giratina is still an incredibly strong attacker. Sableye is still great. Cramorant's great. And then we also see Iron Hands and Ursaluna in here as well. You could also still play Lost Box without the Giratina, and we go with the quote-unquote Greninja version of the deck with the Ursaluna, the Iron Hands, and this one also has a Roaring Moon in it. We also have Sablezard, which has been incredibly strong, and this one also doesn't really see any changes, which is fine. This deck is still incredibly strong. Yes, we're still horrified of Regidrago decks, but people aren't really playing the Kyurem outside of Regidrago, so maybe it's not so scary. We did see Lost Box get a top 2 finish at a regionals not that long ago, so maybe it's time to bring back the Lost Box while people don't respect it, though Regidrago winning a tournament recently does also make things a bit scarier, so keep that in mind as well. Ancient Box sees a couple of adjustments here. We get rid of the Walking Wake and we squeeze in the new Miraidon, where that Unrelenting Onslaught attack lets us do 180 damage if one of your Pokemon attacked on a previous turn. So pretty much after you attack with the Roaring Moon on the first turn of the game, you bring in the Miraidon to swing for 180 damage until you've got enough ancient cards in the discard pile, so which you can come back with the Roaring Moon and do big damage. We also see the Gravity Mountain in here as well, helping us fix our matchups against Stage 2 decks like Charizard, bringing their HP down by 30. Klawf is essentially the same deck that we have seen in tournament for quite some time. This is one that I hope to cover soon, so keep your eyes out for that upcoming Klawf video, assuming that I don't flake out. But I am working on this, and I hope that I can get a Klawf video up soon. One of the interesting quirks between Western territories and Japan is that Japan doesn't play Banette Gardevoir, which is the primary way we are seeing the deck played out west. So most of the time when I was looking through Limitless, I found Banette Dusknoir, which is a cool combo in and of itself. Banette is only doing a little bit of damage with that item lock, and Dusknoir can come in and blow up some smaller targets or fix some of the math on some bigger Pokemon that you are trying to take out with Banette. And it's a very annoying deck with that item lock, which gets even more annoying thanks to Call Bell, where it's an item card that you can only play turn 1 going second, but lets you search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. And you're going to put that Salvatore into your hand so that you can search your deck for a card that has no ability and evolve it from one of your Pokemon. So turn 1 going second, play the Call Bell, grab Salvatore, and then play Salvatore and grab your Banette EX, evolve your Shuppet into Banette, attach an energy, and you get item lock from the first turn. Also, more Latias so that your basic Pokemon have no retreat cost. In particular, this is handy towards the end game so that you can pivot something like a Squawkabilly or a Duskull out of the active and move your Ursaluna in without having to burn a switch card. Chien-Pao was a fan favorite deck, but unfortunately it has fallen on hard times, where in a Dusknoir meta where they can blow up your Frigibaxes and pretty much knock you out of the game before you can even start, Chien-Pao has kind of become more or less unplayable. We don't really see any changes here. Maybe you could squeeze in the Gastrodon in order to prevent stage 2 abilities from popping off, but your opponent could then just pivot Dusknoir into the active, blow them up, at which point you're still screwed. So Chien-Pao probably not, it doesn't really get any new cards from Surging Sparks, and I would not hold my breath on Chien-Pao making a comeback at this point. Greninja EX is a weird deck that sees a lot of play in Japan, more so than out here in Western territories, and this one got second place at an event in Tokyo, and this is a Greninja with Pidgeot. So think of your Charizard engine, and you got the Greninja here with your Pidgeot, Rotom, Lumineon, Pheasantipity. All of those sort of stage 2 techs that you'd normally see in a Charizard deck are here. We do see Crispin in here to help with energy acceleration. We've got some endgame attackers like Radiant Charizard and Ursaluna in here. Not really any new cards, but a very cool combo here that seems like a strong way to play a quote-unquote vanilla Greninja list. This second example has Greninja with the Pidgeot, but this time we squeeze in some Dusknoir action, and we also see a new card here, Counter Gain, which we've talked about before, but if you're behind on prizes, you can reduce your attack cost by 1, making it even easier to pull off your snipe attack. Gouging Fire EX might be a deck on the rise. It's always been a bit underrated, but it recently won an event in Thailand and got top 16 at Lille Regionals. And the update to this build is that we see the new Gouging Fire card, where for 2 fire and a colorless energy does 100 damage, and if your opponent has 4 or fewer prizes remaining, this does 70 more damage. 170 damage on a single prize Pokemon is really nice. This can help you uptrade against something like a Lumineon or a Squawkabilly, or even just do substantial damage to a multi-prize Pokemon that you can take out later. So potentially cool single prize attacker to the deck, giving you a little more depth, because otherwise Gouging Fire has been a pretty linear deck. Galvantula EX has been kind of a disappointment, and it doesn't really see a lot of play in Japan either, but we did see this one crack top 16 with the new Magneton, where you can accelerate a bunch of energy when you blow up the Magneton. You're going to cough up a prize, but if it helps you get your item lock off or even power up your Pikachu, it could be worth it. Latias is in here too for free retreat on your basic Pokemon. Ogerpon Noivern is one of the newer archetypes in the format, and it only sees a couple of small changes here. We do see the counter gain here to reduce our attack cost by 1 when we are behind on prizes, and also a very rare sighting of Pokevital A, where you get to heal 150 damage from one of your Pokemon, and you can't recover this card and play it again. But you could use this to heal off your Ogerpon, your Noivern, or whatever you want. Dialga VSTAR sees the inclusion of a 1/1 Archaludon, and Archaludon could be here as an early game attacker that can power itself up with that Assemble Alloy ability, but also you could use this to power up Dialga VSTAR. Let's say your Matangs don't hit the way you want, you could use Archaludon to accelerate 2 energy guaranteed from your discard pile onto your Dialga, potentially getting you that extra turn. Whether you're playing Venomoth Frostlass or Greninja Frostlass, neither of these decks got any sort of updates in Surging Sparks, so unfortunately not much to look forward to in that front, but these decks are still super annoying to deal with. Serena EX gets some cool combo pieces in Surging Sparks. The first one being Lively Stadium, where each basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, gets plus 30 HP. And so what you're going to do is you're going to play this Lively Stadium first, and then you're going to do the attack where you leave your opponent with 30 HP, and you do that onto a basic Pokemon. And then on a following turn, you bump the stadium, at which point you reduce your opponent's basic HP by 30, and they get instant KO'd. And going the other way, you could do Gravity Mountain, where you'll do the Serena attack on a Stage 2 Pokemon, and then you'll play Gravity Mountain to reduce their HP by 30, knocking them out. The Loyal 3 is a deck that has kind of flopped. However, it's seen a little bit of play in Japan, and this 4th place list has some interesting tech, including a throwback to Regidrago from Astral Radiance, where it has the ability, once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in the active spot, you can draw cards until you have 4 in hand. Now, it doesn't really have synergy in the sense that you can't attack with it. Its retreat cost is horrible, but we can use Pecharunt EX to move a dark Pokemon into the active, so we are nullifying the weakness of Regidrago having a really tough time getting out of the active. So we can use this pretty consistently to draw cards, which I really like. This deck also has a couple new cards, including Call Bell, where you can only use this turn 1 going second, but you get to search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So whether you're looking for Janine's Secret Art for that extra energy, or Boss, or Professor's Research, this can give you an extra shot at them at the beginning of the game. Last but not least, we have the new Gravity Mountain, where each Stage 2 Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, get minus 30 HP, and in particular, this helps us fix the Charizard math, where Okidogi EX is swinging for 260 with the poison on it, plus 40 with the Binding Mochi, and if you got Gravity Mountain in play, you are now taking one-hit KOs on Charizard, and anything with 330 HP or less, so you'll also take out Dragapult as well. The last deck we're going to look at today is Palafin EX, where it gets a buff thanks to Surfer. This supporter lets you switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, and if you do, draw cards until you have 5 cards in hand. Not only does this help you with your setup of Palafin EX, where you have to have Palafin in the active, and then you have to switch it to the bench in order to switch into Palafin EX, it also just gives you an extra pivot option just in case Pecharunt and Morpeko isn't online, and it helps you draw cards as well. So really nice combo piece for this deck. Whew! That was a lot. Oh my god, my throat is so sore right now. But we made it. We covered over 50 deck lists, covering a whole bunch of new decks, pretty much all of the meta decks we have right now, and a bunch of rogue decks as well. I know someone's going to be in the comments being like, Joe, you forgot this deck and that deck. I'm sorry. I tried to cover as much as I could, and I think we got a lot there, and I hope that with all of this information, you are better prepared going into the Surging Sparks meta. But what say you? What decks are looking really good? What new decks are you looking to try out? What decks are you disappointed didn't get much in the way of improvements? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website, InThirdPerson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.